Hey guys, I want to talk about something now that Greymoor is here. It's time to nefes and chill, and I think this is going to be a helpful talk, particularly for newer players or players who are interested in getting to endgame, or even for players who never really had a solid idea of what goes on that can affect some of your gameplay experience. The topic I want to cover in this video today, which I've been meaning to for quite some time now, is the scarcity of tanks in relation to what seems to a lot of people compared to a surplus of healers and damage dealers. By this, I mean, I'm referring to when people always ask, where are the tanks? Where did they go? Why isn't this dungeon group finder queue not working? Why can't I find tanks to replace my tanks who just quit the game or to quit the guild? And so forth. It's pretty much common knowledge at this point in time for a lot of PvE guilds and communities at this point that finding a tank is harder to finding than, a DPS or a healer. And of course, things do get more murky once you have set expectations for what kind of tank or DPS or healer you're looking for, but that's kind of a different story. But generally speaking, tanks are pretty difficult to find for a lot of groups. And I'd like to outline my thoughts in this video as to why the forums, in-game guild chats, and Discord servers always bemoan the lack of tanks in this game, and that they can't find any, or that people have to actually start tanking to replace tanks. And the number one reason actually for this is, for a lot of people, tanking, it can be really too punishing in the fact that when you mess up as a tank, it's definitely much more visible than the mistakes of a DPS who's 1 out of 8 people or 1 out of 3 people, or even a healer at a certain point. One thing an anecdote I can tell you guys, in a pug recently, in a Sunspire pug that didn't obviously go very well, the tank kept dying, and it wasn't really his fault, but it doesn't change the fact that the tank died. So what did the group do? They basically called him like paper, insulted him, and I was like so shocked. I'm like, whoa, this is pretty toxic. And then after like a few tries, he just kept dying, and they kicked him. They insulted him, kicked him, and they were like, man, that guy was bad. And I'm just like thinking to myself, it wasn't entirely his fault that he was dying, but it's really noticeable. And people don't like being noticed when they fuck up. Nobody does, really. You know what I mean? And the second reason why tanks may be scarce is because the entry level into endgame, and I'm speaking from a Rayleigh perspective and also from the endgame perspective, the entry level in endgame for a lot of tanks is either too inaccessible or unattractive to people who do tank. Like, guilds want already good tanks instead of working on training them up or working with the new tanks. And tanks also, I can't sugarcoat this, a lot of tanks that I've met in this game just don't care about trials beyond maybe the arenas and 4-main content. A lot of people definitely do consider PvE endgame for them to be like Maelstrom Arena or the DLC dungeons and hard mode dungeons, with maybe like normal trials sprinkled in between, like some sort of chocolate brown fudge cake. And again, I talked about the deaths and the dying and the pressure and the mistakes that people notice. And another reason why you as a tank sometimes, and this is sort of on the flip side, why you can't find groups, or if you're trying to find good groups, why they might not be looking for tanks, is because they already have the tanks. And very rarely, I think, after like playing this game for a while, the rosters for raids, they rarely change in terms of supports, or if they do, it's usually the tanks that go last. A lot of the time, unless like they're fucking up big time and they gotta be replaced. Typically, at least one of the two tanks or both tanks typically stay the same, and they like a lot of raid rosters and raid teams tend to share a lot of these tanks because there isn't any other tank out there. But that's a different story. The third reason why you may not be finding a lot of tanks, especially for most of you who are watching this video, the pugs or the people who don't really care about organized teams, you're queuing for dungeons and stuff like that. Again, I can't sugarcoat this, but no one wants to sit there and taunt a boss for 10 minutes. No one. not even me, and watch someone spam heavy attacks and cast liquid lightning 10 times in a row, spam the same ability over and over again, and not do DPS or an adequate amount of DPS. And so a lot of tanks actually end up not pugging, or they switch to the DPS role so they can do it themselves better, and they actually just stay there on the DPS role. This happened with a lot of people I know personally, so I can guess this is a general trend, but tanks who do stay tanks typically only tank within their communities or circles of friends, and not Dungeon Group Finder. Just to show you guys what I mean, I've been in queue for like over 10 minutes while recording this video, and I've seen other people wait literally hours while doing something else. It may also surprise you guys to know that before I was a tank, I was a healer. Before that, I was a DPS, and the only reason why I stayed as a tank for raid groups is because there were no other tanks. So this goes back to how, yeah, you may not be seeing a lot of good tanks because they only run with their groups, not with pugs, or even their own guilds, depending on the type of guild you're in. And a symptom that this problem has produced, at least in my eyes, the symptom is basically a lot of people do what a lot of other people also consider as toxic. They call it fake tanking, where they queue up as a damage dealer with a taunt or something just so they can queue up faster as a tank role. Personally, I've gotten a lot of hate for fake tanking myself, even though I'm literally the main reason most of the time why the groups could even clear or even do something like banish cells in less than like 10 to 15 minutes. So I disagree with this whole fake tanking business as being toxic, so long as you can actually clear the content and you're not there to troll or waste people's time. Those are two completely different stories. I disagree with fake tanking being toxic, but again, that's sort of on a tangent. Number 4 reason why there's a scarcity of tanks, in my opinion, content creation. Not a lot of YouTubers or even streamers out there who focus 100% on tanking. And even if there are more people who just want to DPS or even heal than there are people who want to tank, because DPSing or even healing is perceived as more active or more fun to hit certain numbers. As a tank, what numbers are you hitting, right? A lot of groups don't care about buff and debuff uptimes. They just look at tanking as, okay, you hold block and you're done. With that being said, there's also, like, for a lot of things in the game, a lack of a tutorial or information guide from the developers end, which can make things really confusing or awkward or just straight up frustrating for new tanks starting out. So I understand that part too. So now what? Now that we've identified the potential issues that may contribute to the underlying cause of the availability of tanks for a lot of people, what can be done about it? As always, I believe information and education can go a long, long way. I definitely get a lot of questions on Discord and on my Twitch stream for a lot of people who want to start tanking. And from what they tell me, like the information, the stats and stuff, they've kind of encountered some of the issues I mentioned earlier. But also, people who don't know anything about tanking or who have never tanked before often mislead them. Not intentionally, but by unintentionally giving them like false information or misconception of tanking, which can be problematic later on when they want to progress towards endgame or something. But if you are interested in tanking or learning how to tank, I would strongly recommend checking out the 2 Discord servers sort of as an information guide or a resource. Obviously ESOU or ESO University, where I and other endgame tanks can answer your questions. In fact, ironically enough, one of the new professors I brought in to teach and give advice to people who we brought in recently is Wondernuts. He tanked with me for those world record scores when I briefly returned to raiding a couple patches ago. He also is part of 4D, who got the world's first Kind's Aegis hard mode, no death and speedrun, on day 1 of the Greymoor patch, and there are also other tanks much better than me, for sure, that are available to answer your questions. The second Discord you guys should definitely check out is actually a Discord completely focused and dedicating to teaching everything there is to know about tanks and tanking. It's called the Tank Club, and it's run by TC Lee, who is part of the ESO hard mode stream team on Twitch. So if you guys have any questions or want to get started, go for it and join the server as well. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That's my opinion on why people can't find tanks. What are your stories about tanking or finding tanks? What other things would, in your opinion, make tanking look more attractive or would help people with PvE tanking? Share with me your thoughts down in the comments below. As always, thanks for watching, stay safe, have fun, and see you guys next time.